Housing Minister Lee Rowley. Is it Rowley or Rowley?
Rowley. Either's fine.
OK, joining us this morning. Good to see you, Minister. Thanks for taking the time. You want to talk to us about prioritising households who, amongst other things, have a close connection to the UK and their local area. What does that actually mean?
Well, we're consulting today, so the details are going to be talked about over the course of the next 8 weeks and beyond. But we want to make sure that social housing is used in a way. It's always going to be a finite resource. We've built more, but it's always going to be a finite resource. We want to make sure that we use it in a way which works, which supports the people who need it, but is also fair.
But does that mean British homes for British people?
We're proposing today UK citizens and those people who have had a right to remain for 10 years. So yes, we are looking at how we make sure people who've been in this country for a long time have most likely access to social housing, in the same way that people who have lived in a specific part of the UK for a period of time have a greater likelihood of getting social housing there.
What about those that don't fall into those categories?
Well, there are other tenures which are available, other ways to get housing, private rented sector and elsewhere. The government also has a clear responsibility to help those who are homeless, who need temporary accommodation. But fundamentally, with social housing being that finite resource, which I've just talked about, we have to make sure it's used in a way which works and which prioritises people who need it the most, but also people who play by the rules.
OK, so you're further down the list if you're not British or have indefinite leave to remain.
We'll consult, but we are seeking to prioritise out of this, following the consultation.
Is that fair?
Of course it's fair. It's fair that people who've been here for a long time, who have paid into the system, get the access to social housing, which is a precious and finite resource.
Can I ask you about George Freeman, who you'll know resigned or was asked to resign during the latest reshuffle? He said that he couldn't afford to pay his mortgage, which is why he stepped back. He says that his mortgage rose from £800 per month to £2,000 a month, and on a ministerial salary, he couldn't afford it. If he can't afford it on a minister's salary, what hope is there for others? He earned £118,000 a year.
Well, I haven't spoken to George, and I don't know his own personal circumstances, but if you pull back to the broader position, we know that interest rates have risen. We know that means that there are additional mortgage costs for some people. Interest rates have risen all across the world, higher in other countries than in the UK. And the job of government, we've got a plan, is to try and help people through difficult times and make sure that there is a clearer, brighter future ahead, which is what we're trying to do. Hopefully interest rates and therefore mortgage rates are going to start coming down. We've started to see some banks start to reduce their mortgage rates, which is positive, and that will hopefully help people of all income scales in the future.
I understand that, but what does it say about your policies, economic policies, if somebody who earns £118,000 a month can't afford £118,000 a year as a former government minister can't afford to pay their mortgage?
Well, I don't think the comparison is right. I don't know what George's personal circumstances
are. That's what he was saying, not me.
But what I do know is that we've accepted we've been through difficult times. We've accepted that there are greater pressures on household budgets. That's why the government's brought forward a whole heap of support for energy over the last couple of years. And it's why we're clear with our plan that we want interest rates to reduce. We can't abolish economic circumstances, particularly global ones, but we can have a plan to try and help people through those difficult times as we are.
OK, I mean, to that end, households are facing £2 billion in council tax increases across England this spring. How's that going to play out come an election, one wonders?
Well, it's ultimately for councils to decide how they want to raise tax. Some will raise it to a particular level, others to a lesser level. We know there are pressures on council services, which is why we supported local authorities with the best part of £500 million of additional funding last week. And it's ultimately for individual councillors elected to support their communities to decide how they want to spend that money and what they want to do with council tax.
Does the government acknowledge that the financial burden when it comes to council tax lands with the poorest households?
We know that council tax has an impact, just like the BBC licence fee has an impact on some of the poorest households.
Let's not go there, should we?
Well, but it's important.
We can if we want, but I didn't think I was going to today.
But we have to recognise that my job as a minister, the job of government, the job of the Prime Minister is to try to see how we can reduce tax in all circumstances, which is what the Conservatives want to do. We've reduced some national insurance just a few months ago. Labour aren't going to reduce those taxes because Labour just want to take us back to square one.
Are you going to say they've got no plan?
Well, they haven't got a plan, so I don't even need to say it, Kate, because you know they've got no plan either.
You're drilling it into me, you guys. But going back to the point, the serious point, do you acknowledge that when it comes to council tax and license, the biggest financial burden lands with those that are least able to pay it?
And that's why we want councils to be very cautious about making decisions which would raise council tax as high as they can. But ultimately, it is for councils to decide. And what the government is trying to do is support councils with additional funding and then also reduce taxes nationally. Allow
me to bring you slightly off brief and talk about strikes on the railways. Back in December, the Transport Minister said £65,000 was on the table for ASLEF. Mick Whelan said he'd be willing to meet, but they're on strike. What's happened?
Well, the unions, in my view, don't need to be on strike. They're impacting my constituents in North East Derbyshire right now who want to get to work, and they shouldn't be doing that. I don't know why they're striking. I wish they weren't. This is a very long-standing dispute. People just want to get on with getting to work, and the unions should just stop and call the strike on.
Is £65,000 enough for driving trains?
Yes.
So you're asking them to go back to work. You can actually, I'm guessing, make them go back to work, or certainly their employers can, because you change the laws. So why are those not being implemented? What would you be saying to the rail companies this morning?
Well, I hope they'll use them in the future. I'm not close to it, as you say, but as a housing minister rather than a rail minister. But what I understand is that the rail companies have said they may use them in the future. I think
Shouldn't
that would
they be using them now?
Arguably, I hope that they would. And what I think the Prime Minister said, he's disappointed that they're not using them. It's ultimately for the rail operators to decide. But those laws are there across a number of sectors to make sure that when strikes happen, that people are not inconvenienced more than they need to be. And ultimately, none of this would be necessary if the unions didn't call them necessary strikes.
DUP. Let's talk about the DUP. Power sharing has been restored. Do you think the deal that has been done will get the full backing of Conservative MPs here?
Well, I hope so. I mean, this is a sensitive area. It's one that we need to take step by step. It's tentatively good news that the DUP have said they're going to come back into power sharing after several years away from that. It's obviously got to go through further processes. Other parties will announce when we can. Chris Heaton-Harris, the Northern Ireland Secretary, I know, is working very hard on this, but I definitely hope it will be welcomed by people all across the political spectrum.
Sounds like you're cautious. Are you cautiously optimistic?
Hopefully, yes. I mean, we believe in devolution. We want devolution to work, whether it's in Northern Ireland or elsewhere. We want the Assembly back. We want the Executive back. We hope it will be successful, but there's still a few more steps to go. Do
you trust the DUP?
I've got no reason not to trust the DUP.
Oh, really?
Of course, the DUP are acting in good faith. The DUP are standing up for the people that they represent. Northern Ireland is a very complicated area of politics, as you and I know, but ultimately, I think the last few hours have demonstrated a positive step forward, and I hope it continues.
Yesterday, the Iceland boss and former Tory donor made a big deal about converting to the Labour Party. He says he's going to be a Labour Party supporter in future. He even gave Keir Starmer a badge with his name on it.
Well,
have you got one? No, you haven't.
I haven't got one, no. I mean, it is up to individuals to make decisions about who they support.
It's a blow, though, isn't it?
Well, it is up to Richard. If Richard Walker wants to support the Labour Party, I mean, that's not news. I mean, he talked about it was likely he was going to go there. He was talking about not being very happy a number of months ago. But the only party that is supporting businesses, it believes in wealth creation, that wants to make sure that we get money from businesses to be able to support the public services that we all want, is the Conservatives. It's obviously been difficult.
It's a blow, though, isn't it?
I don't think this blow particularly. There are many businesses, many businessmen and women who support the Conservative Party. And people know underneath that the Labour Party is not serious. It doesn't have a plan. And ultimately, the Conservatives, despite a difficult situation, are trying to get us through.
OK, we are out of time, so I'm going to have to let you go because I'm on my best behaviour today. It's good to see you. Thanks so much indeed for joining us. Thank you.